The attorneys general of Maryland and Washington, D.C. are suing the president of the United States, claiming he has failed to completely separate himself from his vast business empire. At the center of it is the little-known piece of law known as the Emoluments Clause. Joining us from Washington, the Attorney General for the District of Columbia, Karl Racine, and Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh. Very good to have you both on board this morning.
So, Karl, let me start with you. We had Jonathan Turley on earlier this morning, and he had a question about standing. Do you have standing?
Yeah, we believe we have standing on two bases. First, sovereign standing, which really goes to the fundamental core duty and responsibility of attorney generals to protect the interest of their residents. If the President of the United States is violating the fundamental anti-corruption law known as the Emoluments Clause, we think that gives us standing to protect our people.
But isn't that something that the federal government should determine and not state attorneys generals?
Well, you make a good point, Joe, and there is no doubt that Congress does indeed have a role within the Emoluments Clause. Look, in a normal presidency, you'd have the following checks and balances. You'd have the president checking himself. Then you'd have the staff checking the president. Then you'd have the Republican-controlled Congress checking the president. We know that's not happening. And so it's the press, the Democratic attorney generals, and others who are invoking the Constitution and taking these things to court.
Harold.
General Frosh, Harold Ford, good morning. Yesterday, Sean Spicer in the press briefing, in answering this question, at the end of the question, end of his answer said this is a politically motivated lawsuit by two attorneys general who majority of their residents didn't support Donald Trump, and they personally don't support that. Number one, how do you react to that? And if there's anything you want to build on General Racine's points, please do.
Yeah, sure. Look, first of all, we're working with crew. They include the ethics advisor to the Obama administration and the ethics advisor to the George W. Bush administration. The Emoluments Clause is the key anti-corruption clause in the Constitution. It protects every American from the president putting his interests above those of all of the rest of us. I think every American needs to know that when the president sends our sons and daughters into harm's way, he's not doing it because of his business interests. We need to know that when he makes a deal with another nation, he's not doing it because he has a golf course there. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue about presidential honesty and the avoidance of corruption.
Brian, does it concern you at all that when people hear about this suit or read about this suit, that there's a general knowledge that there is a big league investigation of the president going on in both the Senate and the House, and there's a major leaguer, Bob Mueller, conducting his own investigation as special prosecutor, and that people would think, you know, oh man, this is just now all politics. They're just jumping on this poor guy because the country is divided. And a lot of Trump supporters will refuse to believe almost anything said or filed against it. Does that concern you at all?
Look, what concerns me is that you have a president who is doing so many things that violate his oath of office. And specifically, the Emoluments Clause is one of the most important protections that we have in the Constitution. Mueller may be looking at things that relate to that. The Russia investigation may unveil some payments that he's received, treatment that he's received from Russia that affects his conduct. But our lawsuit is about things that we know have happened. We know that he's receiving payments from China. We know he's receiving payments from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Afghanistan, and a number of other countries. And we know he's marketing his properties.
So let me interrupt you. Wouldn't you have to prove, though, that he's getting more than market value, or that maybe perhaps those payments have increased exponentially since he became president of the United States?
Well, he's proved that himself. I mean, he got elected president. He doubled the fees at Mar-a-Lago from, that's his Florida resort, from $100,000 to $200,000. He doubled the price of the rooms at the Trump Hotel in Washington. And he brags about what a great negotiator he is, that China is one of his biggest tenants. He himself has testified.
But he bragged about China being one of his biggest tenants during the campaign. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if you go before the court, Don't you have to, doesn't January 20th have to be the cutoff date, and you need to show that there's been an increase exponentially from foreign powers in the money that's gone to the Trump organization?
Joe, I think you're exactly right that January 20th is the key date, and that's the date on which the president should have taken steps to put in a credible divestment plan. The fact that he hasn't, the fact that he so enthusiastically is willing to accept monies from foreign countries who clearly have an interest in trying to influence U.S. policy is why we're filing this lawsuit.
No. Steve Ratner.
So first, I think if I'm correct, he actually doubled those fees at Mar-a-Lago shortly before he was elected, not after. Be that as it may. So the president can be sued civilly. I see that you're going to subpoena his tax records and other interesting documents. What do you see the timeline for this case? When do you think this is going to be in court in a way where we can all find out what was going on with the president, his guests, his taxes, and his businesses?
This will be an extended civil litigation. The president has 60 days to answer to our complaint, and we expect, of course, the president and the department to file a motion to dismiss. I think you're looking at a period of months, and during that time frame, we will be seeking discovery.
All right, Attorney General Karl Racine and Brian Frosh, thank you both very much for being on the show this morning.
And Frank, thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.